Hi, this is my first video blog message. Probably won't be doing too many of these, but once in a while it's good. The main thing I want to cover today is what Russia's goals and methods are in Ukraine relative to their Plan A and Plan B, which have not been very well laid out or defined either by the Russians publicly or by our mainstream media here. The truth is clear. It's clear what's going on, but there's a lot of smoke being blown. So I will lay that out for you in terms of what they were trying to do before and what they're trying to do now. Now that they're redeploying to the Donbass, so that's going to be the main thing I cover. But first, I want to talk about over-the-horizon threats. Okay, if there's anything that we have learned in the last few years, it's that um, the little dramas that we're subjected to, that we're supposed to care about so much, keep changing. And it's like we're bobbing and weaving. And we had the coronavirus, and then all of a sudden we had the BLM and George Floyd, and we're all supposed to worry about how we're racist now and atone for our privilege. And then it went back to being Corona. And then we had the crazy election in the USA, and then now we're all supposed to hate the January 6th people, and they're all terrorists. And then it went back to Corona, and then we were supposed to hate the unvaccinated and try to fire the unvaccinated, and that was the big drama. Then Corona sort of disappeared conveniently right at the same time as the Ukraine drama started, and now we're all Ukrainians, and we have to love the Ukraine and everything. So you can see that the the focus keeps changing, and it's like short attention span theater. But of course, most people are pretty dumb, and the mainstream media cater to the dumb. They cater to typically the lowest common denominator, and the politicians cater to the lowest common denominator as well. A lot of their staff are pretty smart, but the politicians themselves are really pretty dumb. Most of them, not high IQ people, and we see that there's a lot of negative externalities that are happening from the Ukraine-Russia conflict, or should I say the U.S.-Russia proxy war in the Ukraine. For example, we now know that some of the Stinger missiles that have been sent to the Ukraine, there's been over 1,000 Stinger missiles that have been sent. There's no accountability. Some of those have actually gotten out of the Ukraine. We know that already. They're entering the global black market for arms. It's very likely that in the future, one or two of them will be used to shoot down civilian airliners. It's just a matter of time, whether it's 5 or 10 years, whatever. It's going to happen. But that's it'll be a loss of life, but that's almost a small thing in comparison with some of the other externalities. We already know that there's going to be big food shortages later this year. The Ukrainian harvest is going to be largely offline. And we also know that, well, actually, we don't know. But let me tell you, there's a really big risk of another Chernobyl in Ukraine. And it's not because of, Russia attacking the power plants, which never happened. It's The problem is going back to the Soviet days. Ukraine was really just about the most nuclearized part of the USSR. They had still about 50% of their electricity comes from nuclear power, and most of those plants were built in the 1970s or maybe the early 80s, and they're pretty old, and they're running on empty. They're being held together with chewing gum at this point, chewing gum and duct tape and paper clips. Um, Pretty much all of them need substantial capital maintenance, capital improvements that have not been done. And what used to be the case is before the Maidan, before 2014. What used to be the case was that the Ukraine's electrical system, the nationwide electrical grid, was in a surplus in terms of they were able to collect more in revenues from people paying their power bills, right? Then their revenues exceeded their expenses, so they had a surplus. And traditionally, since at least since the early 2000s, that surplus was supposed to go to the nuclear side for maintenance and repairs and capital improvements. And what happened after the 2014 revolution was the economy went south, just basically went to hell because they cut all their economic ties with Russia. So the economy went to hell. The state budget went to hell, and the military expenses, of course, rose hugely, right? So that surplus that they had in the with in the national electrical system, uh, that started going into the general government fund, and probably money is fungible, but probably most of it ended up going to the military. So instead of them maintaining their nuclear power plants as they're supposed to, right, on schedule, as per the manufacturer's intent, instead, the money that is supposed to be going for maintenance and capital improvements on these now, in some cases, 45-year-old plants, is now going, being siphoned off or going to the military or whatever. So on top of that, in the last six months or maybe a year, these plants have been running flat out, just on overdrive, really, due to there's been a shortage of coal in the Ukraine even months before the war, and this was part of the whole global commodities shortage, and they've been running these plants just flat out to compensate for the shortage in conventional electric generation. And so you couple the fact there's the two problems, right? Two pronged. It's that the nuclear plants are being run flat out to compensate for the coal shortage, and then they're not being maintained, at all. Years and years of just basically zero reinvestment into these facilities, and that is a recipe for disaster, right? And we already know that, there was one big nuclear accident in the Ukraine when it was the Ukraine Soviet Socialist Republic. So this is nothing new. However, in the days of the USSR, of course, the USSR was a huge, very powerful country with a lot of means, and they had certainly the means and the wherewithal to liquidate the Chernobyl disaster, right? Just like the Japanese more recently had the means to liquidate or at least partially resolve the Fukushima disaster. Ukraine is not going to be able to deal with any nuclear disaster. They're obviously headed the way of Afghanistan, and they're not going to be able to deal with it. So this is potentially a planetary catastrophe in the making. And some of these plants in the Ukraine are quite large, quite large. They're much bigger than your average plant, bigger than Chernobyl actually. And Chernobyl was relatively small compared to some of these other plants. So we're looking at something that is almost guaranteed to happen. One of these plants is at least one of the reactors is going to go into air at some point. It's just a question of when. Is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be in a year and a half? I don't know. But the longer that this war goes on, and the more that the Ukraine degrades economically, socially, politically, and the closer it gets to sort of a Syria or an Afghanistan scenario, the greater the chance of this happening. And again, this is one of those slightly over the horizon risks. But as you can see, Uncle Sam and the Europeans that are now fighting Russia in the Ukraine, fighting a proxy war, they did not absolutely did not do their homework. They didn't do their homework because they're thinking about today. They're not thinking about tomorrow. You do not want a country the size of Ukraine, of the economy of the Ukraine, with the technology that they have and their infrastructure, basically degrading into a Afghanistan type situation. That is going to be a planetary disaster, and we're all going to be paying for it. And of course, our governments, and all the politicians, that, whoa, we could not have seen this coming. Okay, sure, yeah. Okay. I'm telling you it's coming, right? I'm telling you. So, what you want to do as an individual or a household is definitely make sure you're stocked up on iodine, high dose iodine. Don't be, as they say, the masses are asses. So, you don't want to be the last person, buying iodine on Amazon when everyone else is panicking. So, I'm not saying start eating it now. I'm not saying ingest industrial chemicals with iodine and fish tank cleaner or whatever. And don't be a stupid idiot, right? Don't kill yourself. Don't start overdosing today, but just have it on hand. Have it on hand, right? Have a safe, reputable product on hand for when the shit hits the fan. Okay. Obviously, iodine is really it's an element. It's an element. It's not going to degrade. It's not like a drug. You can keep it. Pretty much indefinitely. So with that out of the way, I'd like to cover the military situation. It's Plan A and Plan B.